We told you we'll be having some discussions on the budget. Of course, we've done some great analysis. We'll continue those analysis, and we want to potentially look at all the things that we can discuss. And we'll be joined by Dr. Priscilla Chumesi Bafo for more analysis. She's an economist who specializes in labor markets. She's a lecturer at the Department of Economics at the University of Ghana. And we'll be having here in the studio, but I also have Andre Japamesa, who's worked in the financial sector of our country, but currently he's a member of parliament for Second D. He's also a legal practitioner, so knows his stuff, can straff his stuff with any of the top financial people around, because he has practical experience of the sector. Thanks for joining me, Andrew.
Always a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and what, in summation, if you want to describe the budget, would you say is your best description for this budget?
Well, I think, well, good morning. Good morning to our cherished viewers this morning. I think the budget amply echoed the sentiments that were expressed by His Excellency the President prior to the presentation yesterday. For me, it offers a glimmer of hope that having successfully managed the economy, particularly if you look at the background from where we were coming. New government saddled with a certain program because the economy had been mismanaged to an extent where the IMF had to provide some relief. And the IMF, having assessed 18 months of the performance of the government that engaged them under the ECF program, gave a bleak assessment of the performance and, you know, gave a certain outlook for 2017 and 2018 that was not essentially positive. So the government, having come in 2017, had a few choices to make, particularly, you know, restoring confidence in the business sector, laying foundation to, as it were, implement major campaign promises that he had made and all that. And if you look at the assessment of the IMF after 18 months of this government, clearly we're on course to exit in December of 2018. Thankfully, now we are there. And we are going to be on our own to implement bold initiatives, but having a tab on reckless expenditure, managing the economy such that we can still stay within the fiscal discipline that we went in the first place to the IMF to seek. So I am particularly excited with the focused delivery with which the government has managed the economy so far. There's been some, you know, slight turbulence along the line, particularly in the area of the exchange rate and the fuel prices, largely on account of external factors.
Yeah.
But of course, if you look critically at the budget, there are ample policy that government intends to roll out to ensure that those events or circumstances, even when they come up, does not impact our economy significantly. So, good budget by all accounts.
We'll discuss those line items and look at potentially some of the areas where we can see growth within the financial year.
Sure.
But we also know that tomorrow will be the start of the African Cup of Nations, the African Women's Cup of Nations, right here in our country. The first match will be between the host Ghana and Algeria. We'll have Mali and Cameroon, Nigeria and South Africa subsequently, and then we have the rest of the standings, so to speak. Mamavi will be bringing to us the latest on that. She'll be bringing to us a roundup of sports as well, but let's bring you some highlights of the presentation of Ken Ofori-Atta, the finance minister, before the plenary of parliament yesterday. Well, government says it intends investing heavily in roads, railways and other infrastructure. Let's bring you some of the highlights.
Mr. Speaker, His Excellency responded and promised. Mr. Speaker, His Excellency responded and promised an innovative change to bring jobs and income to every district through one district, one factory. An innovative change to bring development to our rural areas through One Village, One Dam under IPEP, an innovative change to mobile payment interoperability, an innovative change to 3 development authorities to be a vehicle for accelerated development and the allocation of capital expenditure in our rural areas, an innovative change to the establishment of the Zongo Development Fund as a vehicle to focus on the development needs of Zongo communities, and an innovative change to the approach of entrepreneurship development through the establishment of a ministry and the National Entrepreneurship and Innovation Program. A major focus of the government in the last 22 months has been to clean the economic headwinds we inherited with the restoration and sustainability of macroeconomic stability as the anchor for economic growth. Fiscal policy has been underpinned by increased revenue mobilization, fiscal consolidation, and expenditure prioritization, as well as moving government policy from a focus on taxation to a focus on production. In this regard, government has implemented the following policies and measures. Mr. Speaker, we abolished excise duty on petroleum. We reduced special petroleum tax from 17.5% to 15% and further to 13%, converted from ad valorem to specific tax. In fact, it is important to note that petroleum taxes as a percentage of the total price build-up for petroleum prices has reduced, Mr. Speaker, from 40% in March 2017 to 26% today. We abolished levies imposed on KIA and churches by local authorities. We abolished the 1% special import levy. We abolished 70.5% VAT NHI on domestic airline tickets. We abolished 70.5% VAT NHI on financial services. We abolished the 70.5% VAT NHI on selected imported medicines that are not produced locally. We abolished the 5% VAT NHI on real estate sales. We abolished import duty on the importation of spare parts. We reduced National Electrification Scheme levy from 5% to 2%. We reduced public lighting levy from 5% to 3%. After 22 months of disciplined economic management, Mr. Speaker, the results have been quite remarkable.
And Mr. Ken Oforiatta has also been talking about government's own economic performance within the period.
Economic growth increased from 3.7% in 2016 to 8.5% in 2017. Agriculture growth increased from 3% in 2016 to 8.4% in 2017. Industry growth rose from negative 0.5% in 2016 to 16.7% in 2017. The service sector grew at 4.3% in 2017 compared to 5.7% in 2016. The fiscal deficit was reduced from 9.3% of GDP in 2016 to 5.9% of GDP in 2017, the first time since 2006 that the government has met the deficit target. It is at 2.8% of GDP in June 2018, within the target of 4.5% of GDP in December 2018. Inflation, Mr. Speaker, declined from 15.4% in 2016 to 11.8% in 2017, and now stands, Mr. Speaker, in single digits at 9.5% in October 2018. The Bank of Ghana monetary policy rate saw a year-on-year reduction from 25.5% by end 2016 to 20% by end 2017, and currently stands at 17%. This is the longest 18-month reduction in the policy rate since 2001, an easing of 850 basis points. Interest rates on the 91-day Treasury bills declined from 16.8% and now stands at 13.4%. Ghana's trade position of the rest of the world has strengthened. The trade account recorded a deficit of $1.4 billion in June 2016 improved significantly to a surplus for the first time in 2 decades of 1.1 billion as of June 2017, and another surplus of 1.1 billion as of June 2018. Our gross international reserves increased from 6.2 billion in December 2016, 3.5 months of import cover, to 7.3 billion as of June 2018, 3.9 months of import cover. Ghana's debt to GDP ratio, which increased from 32%, Mr. Speaker, in 2008, when we were last in government, increased to 73.1% in 2016 in the NDC era, declined for the first time since 2007 from 73.1% of GDP in 2016 to 67.3% in June 2018. And for the first time in almost a decade, Mr. Speaker, Standard & Poor's upgraded Ghana's sovereign credit rating from B negative to B, with a stable outlook, in September 2018. These, Mr. Speaker, are remarkable achievements which we are determined to build on in order to improve the lives of Ghanaians. We shall not, Mr. Speaker, return to Egypt again. In preparing this budget, we undertook broad consultations with various stakeholders across the nation.
Well, Mr. Japamasa, it is true that we've been able to realign expenditure vis-a-vis what the revenues are. More so, we've been able to bring back some stability at the macro level. And so it gives us some space and some room to do more.
Absolutely.
But those are good achievements. But it looks like the finance minister seems to be tapping himself too much on the back.
I don't think so at all, because, and indeed, if that is the impression that you seem to get, I do not think there's any apology for that, because the truth of the matter is that we have come from a situation where we were practically hopeless, okay? If you recall, the NDC in 2004 practically told us that, hey, we are down to the bone. There's no room for anything to be done. We had lost credibility. Our macro indicators had all slumped. Government was actually, our economy was in tatters. But that they were not going to the IMF. We were rather going to adopt what they termed as homegrown policies to salvage the economy. They started the implementation of their homegrown policies after the Senchi discussions. You recall. But a couple of months down the line, we realized that there was nothing that was significantly coming out from the Senchi homegrown policies that they had sought to roll out. So they had to resort to the IMF to essentially get some policy credibility, hence the IMF program. Now, if you look at all the economic indicators as at 2016, clearly, and what has been done between then and now, he needs some commendation. And these figures that he put out in the August House of Parliament before the representatives of the people was in order. These are no boastful figures at all. These are actual achievements that have been chalked by this government within a 22-month period. Unprecedented. Some that really has not been achieved in decades. Okay? So some major critical decisions have had to be taken. Some stringent processes have had to be gone through to ensure that we fix the fundamentals so that we can, based on that, spare the growth that we all need. Because look, even in the midst of the tightening of the economy, we still managed to attain some significant growth over the period. So your guess is as good as mine. Now that we are thankfully exiting the IMF program successfully, what it is that with the expert management of the economy that we have. And look, let me take this opportunity to commend the entire economic management team led by the Vice President, of course, the finance minister. They've done a yeoman's job in the past 2 years, because really, if you look at the rating agencies and all that, the way they rated our economy, Ghana was slipping into the gallows. But thankfully, we've been able to pull us out of that situation. And as far as I'm concerned, the sky is the limit.
But we do understand, of course, when you have good ratings, and of course that also will have a certain linkage or alignment with how well you perform at the macro level. It tends to give you some credibility worldwide. You just have to take a look at some countries like Argentina now. You have Greece,
and so if the figures are being put out,
Zimbabwe and some of those other countries
confidently and in the manner that the finance minister did, because we've made significant achievement over the past 22 months. And of course, particularly when you situate it in context of what it is that our friends who took us there and the kind of commentary that they make. Yes, it's politics, I agree. But they tend to create a situation of hopelessness, difficulty, suffering, when in fact, all those situations that they paint was as a result of their bad economic mismanagement, which necessarily had to be fixed. And this government, clearly from the figures, I understand, nobody eats macroeconomic figures, but it's an important measure on how it is that your economy can grow, that can trickle down to to impact the lives of the many citizens of this country. And clearly,
so that is having the potential to grow.
We are
and the space
right
for
path.
it. But at the end of the day, for all the line items we have and for which we have to spend, infrastructure and all the others, and so we have some deficit that we need to plow back.
Absolutely.
It is what you rake in by way of revenue.
Yes.
That will make you meet those targets.
Absolutely.
Now, it looks like even though no new taxes have been introduced significantly, we seem to be at war with the same demographics, number of people paying the same. We need to expand it.
Sure.
We're told that we have a tin
that
method or
absolutely
or,
to ensure that
by which we can achieve
everybody
that.
who accesses public services.
How's that going to work?
How's that going to work? Well, people need birth certificates, no? People need driver's licenses. People want to access national health insurance. People want to access free SHS. You ought to contribute so that you can access those services. So if you have a TIN number that is linked to your bank account and several other things, the NA, national identification coming in, we would have a sense of a formalized economy where transactions that take place in this country can actually be measured. People's revenues can actually be tracked. And so appropriate taxes that you're supposed to pay in accordance with law can be tracked to ensure that you make your contribution.
Just by having a TIN?
You see, yes, of course, if you have the TIN, the tax identification number, that is your tax ID. If you open a bank account and you have 200 million cedi sitting in there at the close of the year, you ought to be able, as your income, and you are in the informal sector, as opposed to some of us who are in the formal sector and salaries are deducted at source. The tax authorities ought to ask you why you haven't paid your taxes at the end of the year, having generated 200,000 cedis income in a particular year. So the tax identification number will enable the tax authorities to track the transactions and incomes that people make to ensure that they collect the revenue that is due to the state from them.
Okay. By the practical means by which this could be achieved, I am thinking, Roland Walker, if I was not working in the formal sector or any formalized structure, I'm a mason or a driver, and I have to access those services using my TIN, there needs to be some feedback or a background information that needs to be feeded onto a certain platform.
Absolutely.
That is indicating that maybe perhaps I undertook this form of transaction through mobile money or through a certain platform. I went to access the services through the National Health Insurance Scheme, etc. And then that platform, which is linked to the TIN, we'll get to know the volume of transactions. And ultimately, then the GRA and its officers can come and reach me and say, look, you have to pay this and this on that and that and that. But it doesn't look like that's how the tin works. I mean, that's the whole issue.
The TIN is only your tax identification.
Yes, but the tin just makes you or gets to have the national the GRA to know that maybe that so and so went to undertake this
as a taxable person. Now, how do we get people in the informal sector to, as it were, contribute by paying their due? You need to get a formalized structure, some database that ensures that transactions that are made by the taxable person is traceable.
Okay.
Without the tin and the formal sector, you can't do it, or some formalized structure. So that is why it's feeding into the national identification. It's feeding into bank accounts. It's feeding into accessing public services. So the idea is to bring everybody into some formalized structure to ensure that the tax authorities can determine the appropriate taxes that ought to be paid by those individuals. And that clearly is an avenue for broadening the tax net.
And talking about broadening, we also have to broaden the conversation. So we'll be joined by Dr. Priscilla Chumesi Bafo. She's an economist and she specializes in labor markets, gender inequality and development. She's a lecturer at the Economics Department of the University of Ghana. She will be joining us very soon. But we also know the finance minister had a lot to say about efforts made and achievement in the banking sector, but also trying to save a lot more customers, well, potential Ghanaians, of course, who work as well as save in the banking sector. Let's have this inset, and then we'll have into the discussions Dr. Priscilla Chumesi Bafo.
Mr. Speaker, not only are we growing the economy, the Bank of Ghana has also done an excellent job in implementing monetary policy. This has resulted in inflation dropping to single digits, lower interest rates, and a relatively stable currency, despite recent turbulence in emerging markets and a strengthening US dollar. The financial system is critical to the functioning and development of the economy, and banks are central to our financial system. In addition to providing employment to a large segment of the population, the role of banks as a provider of credit and liquidity to the economy remains critical to the functioning of the economy. Mr. Speaker, weak macroeconomic conditions coupled with poor corporate governance and risk management in a number of banks over the past few years led to high levels of non-performing loans and abuse of depositors' funds through related parties and affiliates in breach of regulatory requirements. In addition, the lack of enforcement of the rules contributed to liquidity and insolvency challenges in the banking sector. As a result, we inherited a number of weak banks and specialized deposit-taking institutions, savings and loans companies, finance houses, rural and community banks, and microfinance institutions. This eventually led to an assumption and consolidation of 7 banks with potentially adverse consequences for depositors, creditors, employers, suppliers, and other stakeholders. It was critically important that these banks be made to exit the financial system in a timely and orderly fashion to avoid contagion for the rest of the financial system. Mr. Speaker, since the assumption of office by the current administration of the Bank of Ghana, bold measures have been taken to restore the health and resilience of the banking sector and to clamp down on unlicensed deposit-taking financial houses. In addition to the 2 insolvent banks that were closed last year by the Bank of Ghana, 5 more closed in August this year for insolvency and other infractions of the law. Rescuing the situation regarding these 7 banks has so far cost some 9.9 billion Ghana cedis in monies government had not budgeted for and could surely have put in good use to fix our numerous infrastructure needs, roads, bridges, housing, etc. The government has continued to provide assurances to depositors and customers of licensed banks and specialized deposit-taking institutions through demonstrable actions that their deposits are safe. Indeed, following the creation of the Consolidated Bank Limited, a wholly owned government of Ghana and licensed by the Bank of Ghana as a universal bank, the government capitalized over 450 million Ghana cedis. In addition, government had to issue a bond with a face value of 7.6 billion to cover the gap between the deposit liabilities and the remaining good liabilities of the 5 failed banks. This singular action of government has reposed confidence in the banking system because it will ensure that no deposits of the 1.2 million depositors will be lost, and customers will continue to access their deposits without difficulty. Through government's intervention in August this year, deposits of some 11 billion have been saved, as well as some 2,661 jobs, in addition to several hundred saved in 2017. The government's action has also created a strong indigenous Ghanaian bank in place of the 5 failed banks. The government is committed to ensuring that Consolidated Bank Ghana Limited becomes a strong, customer-oriented indigenous bank, well-positioned to meet the demands of all its customers and to serve as a go-to bank for financing small and medium-sized enterprises and corporate Ghana. Mr. Speaker, generally banks have made progress in repairing their balance sheets by writing off bad loans and addressing capital needs. Banks are far advanced in executing their plans to augment their statutory capital in line with the new minimum requirement, compliance of which is expected by end December 2018. The Bank of Ghana is also working on a comprehensive action plan for cleaning up the specialized deposit-taking institutions made up of savings and loan companies, finance houses, rural and community banks, and microfinance institutions. The government will support an orderly resolution of the difficulties and will provide the much-needed funds to facilitate prompt payouts to their depositors. Mr. Speaker, the government's financial interventions in the cleanup exercise have been necessary to help mitigate the socioeconomic impacts arising out of the closure of the failed financial institutions. It is important that the cost of these interventions borne by taxpayers are recovered to the extent possible through recoveries from debtors, shareholders, and related connected parties who, through unfair means, siphon funds from the defunct banks to the detriment of depositors, employees, other stakeholders, and the economy as a whole. The Bank of Ghana has also, Mr. Speaker, set up an Office of Ethics and Internal Investigations to investigate all allegations of misconduct by Bank of Ghana staff, including any role in the collapse of the defunct banks.
Well, you all know all the things that he talked about, but more so the action that had been taken to have a cleanup of the financial sector, and you know, more linked to the banks and what has been ongoing. We have Dr. Priscilla Chumesi Bafo. She is an economist, teaches economics, labor markets, inequality, development, etc., all related and part of her own interests. The finance or the economic department of the University of Ghana. Good morning to you, and thanks for joining me, Doc.
Good morning.
All right.
Thank you for having me.
And you may have perhaps noticed or perused some of the highlights from the budget yesterday, but in relation to the insert that we just played about the cleanup in the financial sector, it was necessary, we're told, but it's also come with a certain backlog, because it will mean that the various sectors within the market are suffering because of the decisions that need to be made. Would you say, by your own observations, they were necessary? And if they were necessary, the way or by the processes that the Bank of Ghana went about them were the right way?
Okay, thank you very much for having me, and good morning to your cherished listeners. I believe that the financial sector cleanup was very necessary. Why is that? Basically, financial markets work based on confidence that people have in the sector. and it's all money through expectations. So, for example, if people deposit their monies with deposit receiving agencies, whether it's a microfinance, a savings and loan, or a bank, and for whatever reason they go back to withdraw and they don't get access to their monies, then it means that they lose confidence in the financial sector.
Exactly.
And we know that how do these financial players work? They are basically collecting surpluses that people have to parcel it and give it out to others in the form of investment funds. So if they don't get those kinds of funds, then it means that, I mean, we are just basically keeping our monies with us, and it means our monies are not being productive in the economy. So for whatever reason it is, I believe that if institutions within the financial sector are not doing well, not keeping their house in order by doing the right thing, then somebody needs to crack the whip and then put our house in order by clearing whatever mishap that might have happened. And the way the Bank of Ghana went about it, in a way, manage expectations of the general public. But that notwithstanding, we also know that it created issues of panic withdrawals in certain quarters, but overall it was not a nationwide thing. So I believe that the cleanup was necessary. My point with the issues that were raised in the budget, I have not read the whole statement. I looked at the summary with the DK and compensation.
For example, yes, when it comes to that.
For example, compensation to people who lost their monies. That is basically attaching a human face to the whole thing, but because I don't believe that it is government's responsibility to pay someone if you invest and then the investment goes bad. We know, for example, what is the current interest rates hovering an average of about 35%. And if you go and invest, no, that is even the lending rates. Yeah. If you go and invest your money somewhere that promises you 100% or 200% overnight, that is your own. I mean, you are taking the risk, and then with the law of investment, the higher the risk, the greater the payoff. Yeah. So certainly, but government is attaching a human face to it because it was quite enormous in terms of the number of people who suffered and the amount of money involved. So overall, I think it's all trying to get confidence back into the financial sector.
Mr. Weston, because you also have been in the industry before, working at the bank extensively, if you take a look at it, and it looks more like a government trying to fulfill a political need. It was a huge campaign issue too, but on the financial side, we're using taxpayers' money to bail out, so to speak.
Well, it's not peculiar to Ghana. I mean, U.S. taxpayers' funds have been used.
Yeah, it was done in 2009
during the financial crisis. Yeah. Because the consequences of not doing that has a huge implication for the larger economy. So sometimes it's important that government steps in, you know, to save the bigger situation and not look at it with a narrow viewpoint that you're saving individual banks or companies or individual depositors for that matter. I believe that following the DKM issue, some steps have been made to pass some legislation to protect depositors. But of course, that only affects smaller depositors. I think that law was passed last year or 2 years ago. Depositors Protection
2016.
Yeah, I think so. And so there's some funding that is going to be set aside by the banks, I believe. You know, some minimum amount of their deposit is going to go into that fund to protect depositor in the event that the banks fail to survive. But on the banking sector cleanup, good decision by all accounts. Priscilla was not, of course, she is not political, so she didn't extend the blame and put it where it properly ought to lie.
So you are doing politics.
Failure of leadership. That's what it was. Failure of leadership. Failure of people who were tasked with the responsibility of managing this economy went to sleep. Either conveniently or for whatever reason, we don't know. But if the Bank of Ghana and the Ministry of Finance at the time had applied the regulation in the manner that ought to have been applied, we wouldn't be here. Yet these are the people who turn around and say government has collapsed banks. Please, let's call a spade a spade. Okay? It was arising out of their negligence to duty. That's where we go here. Such that funds that could have gone into provision of services and infrastructure, that they turn around and say, show us what you've done with the money that you've been given in the past 2 years. Don't you hear them say it all the time? Has had to be used in funding some of these things. And yesterday the finance minister was categorical that nobody is going to be left off the hook. And I expect that in 2019, concrete steps that will satisfy the people of Ghana are taken to punish, if need be, people who got us into this mess. It's important.
You got Priscilla Kringi. She's a lecturer, so she'll go back to the classroom and go and do what she has to do. But at the end of the day, we have to create the needed jobs. The refrain has been that we're an agrarian country, basically. We now have discovered oil, so we have the proceeds. And we know that the growth that we've witnessed, I believe, over the last couple of years, if not the last 2 years, could be more attributable to investment and the growth of the oil sector. Now, if we want to focus on agriculture and link it to the vehicle to create jobs, it also means that we have to invest in not just the normal agricultural structure that we have, but the value chain. We have planting for food and jobs, potentially created over 745,000 based on what the numbers are. But on the ground, we need to make sure that when the produce are in, they need to be cut into a certain structure. The structure also needs to have a certain output. Then we get to a market. Yeah. Of course, there are markets along the lane. Do you think, based on the decisions by way of policy that government has taken, intends to take, we will get there, and when, and how should we rather be doing it?
Okay, so in terms of the performance of the agricultural sector, it has not been great in recent times, but when you look at the numbers, it's picking up gradually. That is what we expect with development. We don't expect to continue to be an agrarian economy forever. So the point then is we need to add value to our agricultural produce. And how do we do that? We do that by setting up factories, for example, to add value, like you mentioned, around the agricultural value chain. Not really sophisticated factories at this point in our development stage, but factories that add a little value, preserve our produce so that farmers are not punished for bumper harvest, for example, storage facilities and all. So in the budget, I saw that there is the Ghana Commodity Exchange, proposal for the Ghana Commodity Exchange.
It's already been inaugurated, it started work.
Oh, okay. So it's basically trying to link agricultural produce to markets. But then the question that arises is, do we have the infrastructure to support such an exchange? For instance, so if they locate produce, for example, yam in the northern region, on average, how many days will it take for the yams to be transported from the northern region to Accra, for example, for that potential buyer, really? Because when we talk about agricultural produce, we are looking basically at perishable goods, right? And these perishable goods need to get to their destination at a certain point. And when you even look at the export of, for example, cut fruits. We know that some companies, for instance, export cut fruits abroad. I mean, they have to, their processes are regimented. The process needs to be cut in certain shape. It has to be specific days and all that. Do we have the infrastructure to support it? So the bottom line is that we need to invest in our infrastructure. We need to invest in our road network, our railways. I mean, goods should not be competing with individuals on the roads, for example. So I believe that infrastructural investment is key to whatever development agenda that we have in terms of adding value to our goods, in terms of conveyance of goods, even from farms to market onto our dining tables. I mean, all these things have to be supported by some basic infrastructure. And if you ask me, at this point in our developmental stage, that infrastructure leaves much to be desired, really.
It makes it more like a policy that could be realized in the long term, whilst we need it rather in the short to medium term.
Exactly. I think that government is thinking big. It's great that government thinks out of the box, to be ingenious, to give us creative ways of trying to solve our problems. I mean, as for that, I give it to the minister and the team. But I believe that
the actions on the ground need to match.
Exactly. They need to match the ambitions, and also in terms of what needs to be done in the short to medium term to achieve the stated objective. And this also feeds into the whole discussion of the need for us to have a national development agenda, so that it's not like this person is in power today, this is their dream, the next time the individual is changed, then the whole thing is abandoned, and it all leads to waste of natural resources and all that. Yes.
Poignant points there.
Yeah, of course. I mean,
for example, I noticed there's some potential areas that were announced in the last budget, were brought in the medium-term review, and now have been brought again. And the line items and the allocations have not been expended. The appropriation has not been done because maybe we haven't gotten the allocations or the money in order for us to do the appropriation.
Yeah, and so it's not new, and I'm not.
Yes. What we're saying is that it shouldn't be the routine.
No, it shouldn't be. I agree, but you ought to situate it in context. Okay. That's under an IMF program where you had to fix the macro sector. Clearly, you may have the plans to expend in some infrastructure development, but a few things may come up that will not enable you to do it. And for me, the commitment to do it clearly is the reason why it's been repeated, if indeed, and I haven't seen it, but I've seen some social media tabulation of projects that were listed last year that clearly were not done, and so has had to come.
It's not social media; they're real. They're documents.
Like I said,
from the budget.
You see,
a document that is put in your pigeonhole in Parliament.
No, I don't have a problem. What I have here with me,
it's the highlights. We're not arguing about that. We're talking about the intentions and then what is realized by way of the output.
I agree with you
so
entirely.
Let's not.
No.
None of us we're not talking.
I'm saying that I haven't seen the document.
Don't worry.
Okay.
But I don't have a problem because, like I said, it's not new. I recall in the Rawlings years there were roads.
We shouldn't be arguing with that. We're saying that it shouldn't be the norm.
No, I agree. I don't have a problem. I'm saying that to the extent that government plans, look, we have individual lives. We make plans that do not necessarily all materialize in every year cycle. It's possible. It happens. Okay, budgets of the state. It's an aggregation of all of us, hopes and aspirations. So I'm saying that to the extent that it's been brought back, clearly demonstrates commitment to do these roads because of the economic importance. And for me, the focus really should be on how government actually implements, makes sure that it raises the requisite revenue to deploy and implement the audacious program that is outlined in the budget 2019. And I'm prepared to have that conversation, okay, and urge the finance minister. And look, because of the fact that I'm part of government, in quote, because I'm not part of the executive, but it's my party that is in government, I had the benefit of some pre-briefing, okay, before the budget was read, because we needed to understand.
Communication purposes.
Absolutely.
They want you to communicate in a certain way.
No.
So that's the briefing that you have. It's normal.
The broad outlines that, but these documents you can't speak otherwise about them. They are factual. And so I can't come and sit here and speak contrary to the budget. No. But I needed to understand the broad framework within which government was intending to go in the direction that it was going from this
year. And you think it's the right direction?
Absolutely, without a doubt. Okay? And I say so because of the commitment that was demonstrated by the finance minister, indicating quite clearly that, look, this is the way we have to go. We know the gaps. We've known them. But in the past 2 years, we have been unable to deal with it as much as we wanted to because of the issues that we inherited.
All right.
That's why he took time yesterday to put the issues in proper context for Ghanaians to understand that, look, let's not listen to the naysayers, the doomsday prophets who kept us in Egypt, that this government is taking us out. We are not returning to Egypt. If you heard him, he said it quite clearly. Yes, of course, along the line, there's been issues. And we hold no issue with admitting the challenges that government has faced.
But for you in academia, and you do the observations, you look at the analysis, and your thoughts usually will just be real. I'm a fan of two professors, Professor Jeffrey Sachs as well as Professor Stiglitz. They are development economists, and I've read a book or two about them that they've written. And potentially, they say for developing countries or developing or emerging economies, the focus on getting the macros right should not be a main objective, because there's some sort of imbalance in their markets in terms of the structure of their economies, which make them contribute to revenue and overall to GDP. So for example, you take the American market. The American market is such a way that the businesses that contribute to the bigger goal, the bigger objective, are big. Are even multinationals, they go beyond their countries. So they can afford to take certain risk. And for us, we have to focus on the micro, developing the resources, the intellectual, the capacity, the skills, and the businesses for them to contribute. Do you think that perhaps excessively as a country we're focused on how GDP is great, how we can have some of the good ratings from Moody's, the rest, and perhaps neglecting some of the little things that could get us there quickly?
Yes, I believe that development theory is broad, and it basically depends on where you're coming from. There's quite a lot of literature that debates the angle from which development should be tackled, particularly for a developing country like us. But like you rightly said, as a developing nation, if we get so fixated on the numbers, GDP growth, inflation, for example, we want to keep it at a single digit, right? The question then is, we know in basic economic theory, there's a trade-off between inflation and unemployment, right? So when you are keeping inflation down, unemployment will be up, right? You can't get the best of both. So have we undertaken any study to know the optimal level of inflation that is ideal to keep our unemployment rates quite sustainable? I mean, these are issues that we need to take a critical look at. But that notwithstanding, I mean, these statistics give us an indication of where the economy is going. I would not advocate for us to just focus on the micro, and I mean, no economy does that. So the statistics are generally broad. We are saying that is a macroeconomic perspective, meaning that we are taking a broader view, a bird's eye view of the economy, right? But the fact that the economy is growing doesn't mean that everybody is prospering, right? So the issues of inequality and other things have to be tackled. How do we deal with issues of unemployment, for example? These are critical issues that need to be looked at. So yes, we cannot rejoice over the fact that all the macroeconomic indicators are right. For that matter, we go to sleep, or we say that yes, we have rich there and all. We look at the teeming youth that are unemployed on our streets. People question the national unemployment rate, for example, of 6%. People question it. But the point is that all these are within a broader framework of how we even collect these statistics, for example, right? In Ghana, in the labor market, for instance, we say that unemployment rates are quite low or comparable to other economies because our economy is basically informal, right? And then with the lack of any benefit system for people who are unemployed, people are basically too poor not to work. Right. So if you are unemployed, you get up, you get a basket, go and sell something. Right. So the issue we're dealing with in our economy mainly is vulnerable employment and underemployment in our economy. And all these are issues that we need to talk about and not just be happy that we have employed X number of people here and all that. Are they earning living wage? How is their standard of living and all as the economy improves? So these are issues that we need to grapple with. Yeah.
So at the end of the day, we say that we create all the avenues for industry to thrive by giving them the vehicles for them to access funding and all that, and giving them incentives. We want to incentivize. But if we want to get to the medium to long-term goal, how should we do it based on this budget that we've presented in such a way that everybody will be satisfied at the end of the day somewhat? That industry, whether through 1DF, 1D, 1F, also will be satisfied to say that the credit that we wanted, we've gotten it, the access to the land potential, we've gotten it, and the tariffs on the amenities or energy for which we need to operate, so that then it brings down the pricing for the market also will be achieved.
Great. I mean, very true. I agree. Entirely with Priscilla once again. Clearly, she knows her stuff, you know. But that recognition is clearly demonstrated in the budget. Because if you look at the budget critically, the finance minister was clear that, look, yes, the macro figures are great, but that can't take us where we want to get to. But it was important for us to fix that, and then it will give us the space to then accelerate the development agenda. So he calls it an accelerator budget. Yesterday he used words to that effect. And so if you look at the key pillars, agriculture modernization, clearly, job creation and livelihood. I don't need my glasses for to read it. You know, industrialization, fix the infrastructure problem, housing and mortgaging for the housing needs of the people, investing in human capital, efficient public service delivery, domestic resource mobilization, strengthening the financial services sector. These are the issues that she mentioned as the pillars that should be the focus of an emerging economy that has not neglected, of course, its macro indicators. And so, like I said, the foundation has been laid. It's now time to.
So that's what we're spending on infrastructure. $2.5 billion, for example, on infrastructure.
The biggest infrastructure investment in one budget cycle.
Wallahi. Now, but let's get real. We need to have more in the coffers. As of now, what we have budgeted 73 billion. Yeah. Well, based on what we have now, we're only going to get around 50-something billion. So we need excess. We have to get into the market and rack up and make sure we add up. But we still have a population or a demographic that need to be taxed. And we say that now we want to use a tin process. Ideally, we needed to have one basic platform. If you go to the US, they have, we're told they have SNITs, a SNIT platform. So once you have a SNIT number, everything is on that platform for you. How do we expand that net in such a way that the ordinary mason market woman will be captured and just going beyond just a tin number to access certain services, and so then you can capture the person? It's something I've been thinking about. What do you make of it?
Yes, asking that question, now we are thinking big. We need money to develop, which is great. So if you ask me, my lowest point in the budget that was presented was the removal of the threshold for the personal income tax. From
you don't think 10,000,
I don't think it should have been removed. At least I believe that it should have reduced, rather, the 35%, if it could have been reduced to 30%, but still keep that threshold there. If you ask me, how many people in Ghana earn more than 20,000 Ghana cedis a month? Right, but I mean, within
like,
the band,
it's almost like you've captured nobody.
Certainly, and we need the money. So what informed that decision, I am still yet to be convinced, but I believe that they should have kept the band there.
Let me help. No, just a quick interjection. I think that the argument from many of the, if you like, middle-level employees who were in that bracket was that really $10,000 is only about 2,000. I mean, 10,000 Ghana is only about 2,500 cedi. That cannot be high income. You know,
really within Ghana?
Well, but people get some fat paychecks in this country.
No, but she's saying how many?
How many people are within that income bracket? Right.
That's what she's asking.
Yes, exactly. And in Ghana, if you earn 10,000 Ghana cedis a month, trust me,
she's a lecturer,
you are among the top. Yes,
I agree.
So what informed that decision? Because this is us out there trying to shop for avenues to increase the tax base so that we increase our tax revenue.
Dr. Chubafo, let me tell you, it was political. Let's leave it at that.
Okay,
now, let's
great.
move on.
Okay.
So expanding the tax and
okay, great.
I don't think so.
So accepted. Expanding the tax base, we believe that because of the informal nature of our economy, it is quite difficult to capture people and who are there. And if you ask me, quite a chunk of incomes that are being made are in the markets, are in the informal sector. So we need to find a way so that we bring all those people on board. In the mid-year budget review, government came out with some ingenious ways of trying to do that. For example, through the vehicle, what do you call it, luxury vehicle taxes, and the personal income tax, which is now basically a white elephant, if you ask me. And then, so the tin is a great way that we can use to capture people. The Ghana card, if it becomes operational, it means that it gives us some basic information about people, where they are, their ages, and also they can be tracked by the revenue agencies. If at the end of the day we get onto one platform and people are expected to file their tax returns at the end of the year, I mean, they can be tracked to ask, why are you not filing your tax reform? So all these are issues that are being addressed by making sure that people who are out of the tax net are captured, really. But I believe that
does it work in the short to medium term? For example, I'm thinking, somebody who built your house, amazing. You give that person cash, or let's say mobile money.
Yes.
That person goes to access that mobile money. Before they access, you're asked your tin.
Exactly.
So you provide the tin. But me providing the tin on that platform alone, what will it do? It will give some feedback to GRA.
Exactly.
That this guy within this so and so period of the year was able to withdraw this amount of cash. And so you come to me in Ashaiman and tell them you do this.
So it comes back to the
you don't even know where I stay in the
of exactly the location of individuals. But I think that we have to start from somewhere.
It's almost like a long shot.
Certainly. But I believe that we have to start from somewhere.
Grab some people,
certainly,
and then it will be expanded as we go along.
Like we're just fishing.
Certainly,
but
at the moment,
is intended to fish. No.
At the moment, that is what we are trying to do, to make sure that so tin being required for mobile money transactions, for example, is a way that. But then again, I mean, people will raise legal issues of what do we call it? Trying to track what people are doing with their funds and all. But in developed countries, no transactions go under the radar, right? It doesn't go off the book. Whatever you do can be traced. Exactly. Okay. And it is tracing these transactions that give us an idea of what people are doing and how they can be taxed, really. So I believe that, yes, I mean, the posting of 10,000 NAPCO beneficiaries to GRA, it is my hope that they will be out there working,
so they'll be
and not go
exactly.
I mean, VRA
I think that's a good point.
Exactly, and not just go and
sit in offices.
Exactly,
and idle
exactly.
They so should. You're saying that it is not about the intentions; it's about the delivery of how we tend to actualize some of the intentions.
Exactly.
That's been our problem. Look, over the last couple of years, we've had, if you look at the line items on the budget, it looks like we've loaded it with more social spending. So people have to go to school. We have to, for example, free SHS. We'll spend over 3 billion Ghana cedis just next year alone because of the budgets or the cohorts now that will be enjoying it. At the end of the day, we need to have a certain relook. We're told that if you spend on education, it's an investment worth spending. But I don't think that before the end of the political term of the government, you have the output immediately. It's almost like a long-term issue. Of course, we need it, so we're happy. How do we go about this sort of social spending in such a way that we have to strike a certain balance between potentially those who can pay and those, we can't have everything for free, can we? What should be the best practice that we can learn from?
Yes, surprisingly, I mean, the minister mentioned anyway, it might have been politics that all the social intervention measures in the country were introduced by NPP, right, and all that. It's quite surprising why, if you look at the ideological background of NPP, it's quite surprising that now they are moving towards a more socialist-oriented party. It is not bad for us to be concerned about the vulnerable in society, right? The point is that if you look at best practices like economies like the UK, for example, which is, I mean, has a very solid social protection scheme for the vulnerable. These are economies where people are paying taxes through their noses, really. Yeah. So we cannot have the best of both worlds. That at one end we are trying to spend money on social intervention measures like LEAP and all, and at the other end we don't want to upset people by taxing them. So the point really with, and my concern with the Ministry of Education, what do you call disbursement for 2019, it appears the focus on the educational sector is basically on senior high schools, but education, we know, start from the basics, right? So what are we doing in terms of infrastructural development in the educational sector? We know that disbursements that goes into free SHS are for feeding, for books and clothing and all, and boarding facilities, but what are we doing with improving the infrastructure at the secondary level, for example? Now we know there is, they've rolled out the double track system due to the increase in the number of students at the moment. The plan is to revert back to the single track in I think about 3 or 4 years time. So are we thinking ahead? Are we planning ahead as a nation? And if you ask me, we had all these demographics with the very high fertility rate we had about a decade and a half ago. Where did we think these children would be going? We should have planned ahead as a nation to look into the future to see that, I mean, in the next 15, 20 years, these children would be in the secondary school, so we need to plan ahead.
The plan was to keep 100,000 children.
Don't let him distract you. That's the strategy.
I believe that we should invest in education, which is what we are doing. But then I still insist that all well-meaning experts, Ghanaians, are advocating that there should be some targeting within the free SHS, what do you call it, problem?
Because we can't just be spending. It's almost like a free fall.
If you ask me, the gentleman looking all dapper this morning, if his son or daughter is going to secondary school, and you ask him to take it for free, I mean, does he even appreciate what you are giving him? So I believe that going forward is a great policy. We are not leaving anybody behind. But some people have taken about a mile or two steps ahead of us, so they cannot be behind. Right. So I believe that, I mean, these are ways that we need to target to make sure that we are giving quality education. Right. It's not a matter of
quantity.
Exactly. We are giving quality education where the average free SHS graduate can compete anywhere in the world.
And you are in the university. You know how they behave when they come.
Yeah. You see, that argument is worthy of exploration. That at a certain point, people ought to be made to pay. I mean, those who can afford. There's a huge challenge as to how you're going to do the needs assessment to determine who can and who cannot pay. But I think that if we're able to achieve a significant formalization of the economy with all the things that we're doing,
that's not now.
Ghana, yeah, of course.
Even
I agree.
For 3 weeks, it took the National
2 days ago,
Identification Authority
2 days ago
to register only 114,000 people at Adenta. It's not easy.
You know, and the former Minister of Health under President Kufuor's era, we were having a discussion on following the graphic breakfast meeting where Prof. Aiti had made the comments on, you know, people paying.
You didn't like his comment?
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
Because
but some of your people were not fine.
No, it's a useful conversation to have. But I think that the decision that Cabinet took was that, look, we are not in the position at the time of the implementation of the program to determine who can and who cannot pay. In any event, spending 2-3% of our total revenue in ensuring that every Ghanaian child goes to secondary school is a worthwhile investment. And so let's make it free for all. We may get to a point.
Do you know that in some of the schools we have people with aggregate 40, 30 going to top school, well, so-called top school?
You see, I'll use myself as an example. I had 214 in common entrance at the time.
Okay.
214.
The accumulation, because I remember
absolutely. I was terrible in primary school, but I ended up A-level with a 2 B's and a C.
But that's not the point. It's about the numbers.
You see, no, wait.
And now the point is this. That,
wait.
So we need the quality from the foundational level. And that's what Dr. Priscilla Chumesi-Bafo is advocating.
I went to a solid primary school. See, the point and the rationale, we should understand the rationale why the ministry is saying that people who went to deprived schools, and because they didn't have the kind of foundation that the Mertons and the SOSs would have, should still be given an opportunity to go to the Achimotes of this world. Because some people have late potential development.
No, I have mates who are like that.
So it's fine. I mean, I don't have a problem.
We're talking the numbers. It's the quantum of people who will be in that bracket. And the teaching environment doesn't make way for the development of the late learners.
2.5 years.
Anyway, thank you very much. It's okay. No more politics. So we've had in the studio Andrew Japamesa. He's a legal practitioner, member of parliament for secondary. We don't have the time.
And provision that has been made.
And helping us do the discussions neutrally. Helping us do the discussions neutrally is Dr. Priscilla Chumesi-Bafo. She's an economist. She is an economics lecturer at the economics department of the University of Ghana. Thanks for joining me, the lady in yellow. You're beautiful too. So that's a good one. And enjoy your day. I've enjoyed the conversation, both of you. He mixing the politics with the real issues.
It's unfortunate you heckled me in the last minute.
Well, but let's get on to the street. We decided to sample some views of You and I, ordinary Ghanaians, because you and I, we fall in that bracket, not Andre Japamesa. And many of you expressed some satisfaction with government estimates for the 2019 financial year, but also question how possible the initiatives could be achieved.
But me, I think since we are yet to go in 2019, maybe we just wait and see how it's going to come out. Is it feasible? That's the question we're supposed to be asking. I'm quite interested in the 2.5 billion US dollars for the industry here in Ghana. I mean, we are crying for jobs and employment and all that. So if there's an amount like this for just industry here in the country, I'm just being hopeful that it works out correctly.
I didn't watch the whole 3.5 hours, I guess, but I was able to chance upon a few things. I'm excited that an amount of money has been allocated to the Office of the Special Prosecutor. It is one of the major, finance has been one of the major challenges of that office, and hopefully with the allocation of this money, Martin Amidu can start work. But of course, it's got to be backed with a legislative instrument, the LI, which is yet to mature. So I'm excited with the allocation of money for the Office of the Special Prosecutor.
Some petroleum taxes has been waived from about, let's say, 17 to 13 and etc. I hope things will change a little. So I haven't got real into the budget system, but I will listen and see where maybe. I hope this year it will be better. This budget will be better than previously.
We hope so. Once a government has come in and solving a problem, something like Doomsaw, the time we came here, you see that our light is on. The government is trying. Well, the previous one, he promised a lot, but we didn't see any improvement. So we are hoping that things will improve. Yeah.
It's true. The way you ask the question, you have been facing many of these questions over here. Sometimes you come and ask about budgets. To me, when they read budget in Ghana, what they read on the day is different from what they do when the year comes. So today's budget, they have mentioned a lot about the importers. Because we saw the same thing last year. They told us that there will be a reduction in the taxes, the import taxes and import duties. But yet we are crying for it. So what shows that they will do it this time? To me, unless we reach next year and we go to clear our goods, then we see that, okay, what they said last year has taken effect. Unless I cannot say anything.
Okay, to me, about the budget now, no. For me, like the first one, every year they have written the budget. To me, about Bosoka, I have not get any benefit from it. The same thing, they will say it's sweet there, but when you go to the market or when you go to the port or wherever it is, I've not been getting anything from it. So for me, I can say the whole day, since morning when the man started about the budget, I haven't listened to radio because it's the same story. They will send you sweet on the pyramid there. When you come outside, you won't get anything. So I haven't listened to it. Maybe after I'll go to online and check some things. That's all.